Welcome to In the Zone number 73, and I am Craig Zimmerman, and the guy sitting across from me is what I'll call as a St. Clair royalty, the Klecha name, Roy Klecha. Welcome into In the Zone.
Thank you, Craig. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, Roy, I say that because there's parks named after the family. Your father has been in town, family forever and ever. Let's talk about where Roy Klecha Jr. was born and raised.
Let's do that. And as you say, the park, Craig, the Joe Klecha Park, that's actually my uncle. And the St. Clair Little League was just so fortunate to have somebody like him who did the job he did to make it what it is, and obviously just flourishing today. So tremendous.
Were you able to play Little League while he was running Little League?
Not only while he was running it, but he was my coach.
Okay.
So back in the days of the Indians. So
there you go.
Enjoyed that very much.
I would say you can't remember what you had for lunch yesterday or today, but you can remember the team you were on when you're 8, 9, 10 years old.
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
So you were born locally. Tell us about your mother, your father, your siblings.
Yeah. Well, I was born in St. Clair, but we lived specifically in East China Township, frankly not too far from the Little League Park. But at that particular point in time, it didn't differentiate quite as much between East China and St. Clair. Everybody just said St. Clair. So I was my parents, Roy and Irene, and I have an older brother, Joe, approximately 10 years older than I am, and a younger brother, Jim, about a year and a half younger. So we all enjoyed living in St. Clair that way, and I know we're going to go into my career a bit. I always tend to talk about my dad's career. He was at the Diamond Crystal, and he was there for about 45 years before he retired. So I like to think possibly in the genes that kept me in a career for a long time as well that I enjoyed.
Which is something that really does not happen very often, and it happened to two different ends of the family.
Yeah, so true.
So you go to St. Clair schools.
Yeah.
Tell me about your schooling days.
Okay, grade school was at St. Mary's School here in town, and enjoyed that very much. And from there, I actually ended up at Sacred Heart Seminary High School in Detroit. As a matter of fact, we were the class at the high school that was the final class that they put through the high school. So it was pretty monumental, but it was just a terrific experience being there. Not to say I didn't miss some things here in St. Clair, but it's what I wanted to do at the time. And
now, where was that high school at? Was it at the seminary?
It was right at the seminary because the seminary housed the college, and they had a little building next door that housed the high school as well. So
you lived there?
I was a boarder.
Okay.
We had some day dogs, the kids who lived close and could drive or ride or whatever. But I went home on the weekends when I was there for school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after high school, so how and when did you decide to go where for college?
Okay. Craig graduated in 1970, and the counselor at the high school helped me out considerably because it was a question, but finally decided to go to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And so spent 4 years there, and those were 4 terrific years as well. And look back on those with a lot of pride and happiness.
So now, when you went to University of Michigan, what kind of degree did you get from there?
I majored in economics.
Okay.
So somewhat on the business end, but I guess it was more specifically a liberal arts. But definitely took a lot of math classes, a lot of business classes. So it still melds into what I ended up doing in the future that way.
So you go to Michigan, you could do your 4-year degree in 4 years.
Fortunately, yeah.
You come out of college, and tell me, were there many different avenues to go at that point?
It's funny you say that. I was just talking to somebody about that the other day, because you graduate, right? And you enjoy living in Ann Arbor, right? And so actually I interviewed for a couple of positions in some banks in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
Me and 20,000 other kids.
Right, right, exactly.
So, needless to say, it didn't happen. It didn't happen that I stayed in Ann Arbor that way. So I graduated in June of 1974. Came home, went down to the local bank, Commercial and Savings Bank. Actually, had the opportunity to speak with Frank, yeah,
Okay.
father and
Mr.
son.
Moore.
Yeah, that's right. And offered the job and
So then
took
you
off
come.
from there.
So you come back to St. Clair. Much like a lot of small town stuff, you know, your dad worked for the Moores, the cousins, right?
That's correct.
Over at the salt company.
That's right.
Family-run business in a small town bank. They probably knew each other.
This is true. I think my dad was the one who actually set up the appointment from knowing him, right? Yeah,
right.
That's
so
correct.
we'll give this young Klecha guy a chance.
Yeah, well, I think there was a lot to that.
Yeah.
Being a local probably helped out.
So back in 1974, not that I'm going to try to pin you to a number, but I'm sure it was a huge salary of like what, maybe 12, 14,000 a year.
You know, I wish I was making that. No, it had to be in that ballpark.
Right? And so you start, I think we talked before we started on camera, you know, you started as a trainee.
At management trainee was my title.
So were you a teller at one point?
You know, at that bank, they had something called a note cage, and it was across from the tellers. But what it was basically a teller station for loan transactions and loan people and such. So not only was I getting to know the loan end, but you were a teller. You had a teller drawer.
Sure.
Not to the extent the tellers were doing it, but you were feeling all ends of the bank that way.
So when you started, say, in 1974, and you're a young buck coming in for your first day, and you put on a suit and tie, because back then everybody did, right?
You always wear a coat and tie.
Right. So you walk into the bank for the first day. Can you remember who the mentors, say the first, year, who they would have been?
I can remember that very well. Yeah, my ultimate boss was Jack Vardy.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was just talking to you a little earlier that I tried to keep in touch with him, and we just lost him last year. My immediate boss was Bonnie Sumner, who I worked with for many years after that, and truly the person who was teaching me my job going in was Rob Gunn.
Okay.
So
I know all those people.
I know. We talk about names that you've heard time and time again.
I know Rob, and I got to call Rob, because we got to get Rob to sit in here too.
Of course, yeah.
So, you know, I have an interesting scenario just because I can remember as a kid going with my grandfather, my father, to the bank. And we talked about before the camera went on, but basically I can remember those days of, you know, going downstairs maybe for loans. It was a different era in banking. Yeah. Most of your customers you dealt with, you got to know them.
I don't think there's any question about that. That you knew your customers, of course. And
then in the bank that's still there, it's Fifth Third in town. I still remember walking in, and I'll call it the mezzanine. I don't know if that's what they call it, but the upstairs with the offices were all filled. So Commercial and Savings back in that day did the lion's share of business in town, right?
Yes.
You know?
Yes, they did. They were definitely the hometown bank, or the community bank.
And then they obviously over the years branched out to places like Port Huron and I think K-Pac or out that way.
They actually had offices in Emmett, Yale, Port Huron, Wadhams.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you're saying that, I can see them sitting on the corner of Wadhams and Lapeer.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
So back then, the buck stopped right there, right, with the Moores?
Oh, that was definitely the case.
So when they loaned a person or a business money, they didn't go somewhere else to get an approval, and it didn't have to necessarily go to a score. Am I correct?
You're correct.
So a lot of loans, you obviously did auto loans, did mortgages, and just general purpose loans.
This is true. Your bread and butter at a bank like that were probably your mortgages, which is a little more S&L oriented now. But everybody's doing it. But at that point in time, yeah, the mortgages were a key, and you did a considerable number of consumer loans, and you were just branching a little more into commercial loans, business loans, but more so dealing with the people you knew.
Right. So you might deal with a plastics company that's been in town for 30 years.
Exactly.
My grandfather that started, I'm sure at times he would walk in and eat. I remember my uncle told me a story about my grandfather borrowing money. This is a story that we didn't talk about, but I guess my grandfather, being the old German immigrant, walking in and asking for a loan, and at the time it might have been $5,000, which at that time might have been a big amount of money, right?
More so.
I guess he goes in to get a loan, and somebody said, "What do you want the money for?" And being the bold immigrant, he said, "What's the difference what I want the money?"
Yeah, what does it matter to you?
So it could have been
That's funny.
yourself, it could have been Stu Parent, I don't know who it was, but maybe they went, I'll be right back. Walk upstairs, see Mr. Moore and say, I've got this person here. Are they good for $5,000 today, right?
There was a lot of that.
And then in those days, you probably went to your portion of your box to get the certified checkout. You put it in the typewriter, and you go to type the amounts in and everything in there.
That was always the case. Yeah. Matter of fact, a number of our loans were handwritten. Yeah, it's just the way it was.
And I'm assuming in the early to mid 70s, there was no computers to deal with.
No, the ledgers and things were done on true general ledger machines. Well, when you talk to Rob, he can tell you more about that kind of stuff. He was really part of that.
So then you spend up roughly how many years with Commercial and Savings, roughly?
I was with Commercial and Savings Bank about 14 years.
Okay. So they get to the point where Mr. Moore Jr., I'll say, Frank Jr.
Yep.
He was probably in his mid to late 50s, I'm guessing.
That's probably about right.
And probably like banks at that time, they're probably getting calls from, I'll call it the big boys, wanting to buy them out. So at some point, Mr. Moore, and we won't go into details, but he says yes to that.
Well, even before that, Craig, because in '74, when we talked about the offices that the Commercial and Savings Bank had, they also had a sister bank, Elginak Savings Bank. They were referred to as a two-bank holding company.
Okay.
And Elginak had their own offices, Elginak, Marine City, Pearl Beach, Fairhaven.
Yep.
Yeah, and actually, after a while, Harson's Island.
Okay.
So in 1988, an opportunity arose within the entire organization, and they asked if I wanted to go over and take the number 2 position at Elginak Savings Bank. And it looked like a terrific opportunity, and so I said yes, and that's where we headed from there to be a part of that.
So you work in Elginak, you're doing sort of the same thing, but maybe a level up?
I guess that's a good way to put it, a little more supervisory than quite as much hands-on, but in a community bank, you find out pretty soon that everybody's kind of hands-on.
Right.
But yeah, that was the case. And at that point in time, I was reporting to Don Osterlund.
Okay.
And so, those were the days of the Elginak Savings Bank.
So then at some point, they get doors knocked on, phone calls made that, probably more than once, I'm sure.
I can only imagine.
And I remember the name isn't there today, but it was old Kent that came and bought Commercial and Savings and Elginak Bank at the same time?
That's correct. Go back to I stated Elginak Savings Bank and Commercial and Savings Bank, two-bank holding company. The name of the company was the Seaway Financial Corporation.
Okay.
That
Yep.
yeah, it just happened to be their name that way. So Old Kent, you're right, in I believe it was like 1996, came in and purchased Seaway Financial Corporation. Yeah.
So then, Old Kent comes in.
Yep.
How long does Roy Klecha stay with that company?
I stayed a little less than a year.
Okay.
Yeah, not quite a year.
Was that by design?
I think it was kind of an understanding as we went through that it wasn't a fit for either one of us.
Sure.
That the position that I was in and what they were looking for going
Right.
forward, and what I was hoping to do going forward, yeah,
Sure.
wasn't the same thing. So, yeah, so
Yeah.
we a mutual parting of the ways
Sure.
at that particular point in
So
time.
then, from there, you might have had to stop somewhere else, but you had something brewing in your mind.
This is true. Yeah, right from leaving that point. Yeah, you're right.
And so, how long was that brewing in your mind to start something different?
Well, almost immediately.
Okay.
That's what I was searching for. And as you say, my first attempt, yeah, didn't work out quite the way I'd hoped. But fortunately, in 2001, I was introduced to a group that were coming out of Bad Axe, out of North Star Bank, and they had actually, they were just in the process of opening their bank.
Okay.
Yeah, which they opened in February 2001. I met them at the time they were opening their bank, and I introduced them to the idea of a bank in St. Clair, and sold the idea. They were excited. I was excited, and that early in 2001, the planning began.
Now, under what idea were you meeting with them for?
To open a bank.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It was, yeah. That was the plan.
Okay. So, I talked about this earlier, but that's
Sure.
a monumental task, I would believe. From zero, you had no building, right? I mean,
Yeah, you're right.
you technically you had no employees, although you probably had some people in mind.
That's exactly the case.
So let me minimize this to the point of, I come from the copier business. A box of copy paper is 5,000 pages. I'm assuming that you filled out a couple boxes of paper.
There is a lot of paper. Yeah, that went through that process.
Just because you're dealing with the government and regulations.
And two different government agencies, actually. You're dealing with the FDIC on the federal side, and you're dealing with the state of Michigan on the state side. And they each have their own requirements that you have to meet.
Right.
And you just start in and you start to meet them. But just as you say, you have an idea in mind how long from the time you start this that it might come to an end, which is 9 months to a year kind of thing. And then you have to be determining, okay, on the assumption that they say yes, that everything goes well. And obviously, as you're going through the process, you're getting affirmation.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not like this is
Just
you're,
one
you're-
day,
You're just
right.
going in blind or anything. But so at some point you have to start just what you were talking about. When do I have the employees ready to go? When do I have the building ready to go? And yeah,
Right.
so many other things that come into that planning process as well.
So now my memory's pretty good, but I can't remember. Did you actually start at the building on Fredmore Highway or no?
Well, it's funny you say that. That was the first building that when we opened the bank, we did.
Okay.
We were there on the first day of Seaway opening. Prior to that, and I think Paul would remember this very well, he had his office on Sinclair Street. I don't
know what that is.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. Paul had his office there,
Okay.
and I had already hired a number of employees
Sure.
to get things rolling.
Yeah.
Bonnie being one, Brian another, and people
Bonnie
like that.
Sumner, who was there with you at Commercial and Savings.
Correct. Actually, longer than I was
Okay.
at Commercial and Savings
Yeah.
Bank. That's true. And Brian, who was with me at Elginak Savings Bank. So had these people on board and had to have a place to put them. So we rented out some space at Sinclair. And so we
Which
were
is right behind the Chrysler dealer.
exactly, yeah. So we were sharing space with Paul, just getting things ready. That was our, I guess you might say, our little headquarters.
Okay.
Until we actually opened the bank that way.
So then, did everything come to fruition in about the right time period you were thinking, or did it take a little longer?
No, you know, it actually came together. We probably started the application process in about April, so it probably came together a little more quickly than we had anticipated. And we opened in December of 2001. So
Now, meanwhile, you're having to get a building constructed
correct.
to your specifications
Yep.
and vaults and all this other stuff.
Yep.
There was plenty to do.
Yeah, there was a lot to do. Yeah, yeah. And actually, often we would spend time in Bad Axe at the home office, getting things done there,
Sure.
and working on things that needed to be handled there at the office. But the closer we got to December, the more time was being spent right here, Sinclair, so that we could quickly move right over.
Now, if you think back in your mind, do you think back that it was fairly smooth, or was there a lot of harried, hurried moments and times and weeks and under the gun?
I'd like to believe that I'm an individual that is somewhat calm in
Right.
that regard, and so it always seemed to me like this is coming together okay. I mean, obviously you run into some snags and such, but
Sure.
but we got through them okay. So I won't ever say there came a time where we thought, oh
boy.
man, what the heck are we going to do now? Yeah.
Well, and then, so you get it off and running in 2001, and then it's not like a scenario where somebody's having a baby and, oh, the baby's here. No, it's now open. Now you have to produce the results of which you laid out.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
You have to have the customers come. I always remember the story. I talked to the branch manager the first day we actually opened the doors, and so I asked all the employees to park somewhere out of the way to leave
Right.
plenty of room, and didn't need it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're waiting for the door to
First
open.
day you're opening, they're not rushing through the doors. It was a process.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it took a little time.
Well, you know, the thing of it is, you helped build a business in town that was many, many years in the making. And so some people, they may like Roy Klecha, but I got my account over there.
It's not easy to move
Right.
an account once you have it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then just habits.
Yep.
People, that is one thing that I notice even myself. You don't find yourself changing that stuff. It's not a fun thing to change it all.
No,
So-
yeah, that's true.
Right.
You really have to want to do it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And fortunately, by bringing on a lot of the people that we did at Seaway at that point in time, by bringing people that individuals in town and around
Sure.
town wanted to deal with, well, that was the draw.
Well, I've always said that in whatever business climate, there's always good room for a good locally run business. And things have
That's a-
changed, we know that,
Yep.
but people still want to be treated with respect and know their name.
Exactly.
And some of these big banks taking over, that all went away. I mean, yes, you might know the teller because you go in there, but there's not much more that you're going to get out of a bank, one of the big banks, without it going through some system
So true.
and coming back a week or two later, right?
Yep, yep.
So, I mean, the days of going to a small town bank. Now, you've been retired a few years.
I am.
In your latter years there, would you still have people to come in and need a car loan or a personal loan that you would approve in a day or two?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Certainly, the system, even while I was there, was becoming a little more sophisticated as
Sure.
far as because I think you made the comment earlier, sometimes you didn't even look at an application. But
Right.
yeah, anymore it was pretty important, especially after the days of 2008 and 2009.
Right.
That you do look more closely at the whole situation that way. And
Sure.
so yeah, so process was important.
So with Seaway now running 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's just say the golden years, 2012, 13, 14, 15, before you retire, you see some serious, just general growth? Is that?
The growth was tremendous.
Okay.
We, I mean, I told you about the first day, but from there we really did. The people embraced us.
Sure.
Yeah, the customers at all of our different offices. Yeah, at the St. Clair office, at the Algonac office, at the Richmond and Port Huron office.
So that's a whole nother chapter here, in the sense of, so you get this one open here,
Yeah.
and you get that up and running. How long of a period before you got this up and running before you thought about the second or third or fourth?
Well, right from the start, I had sold the people that were with at North Star on the Algonac office as well, because I think, as I mentioned to you earlier, Craig, it was we're pretty comfortable in believing that we were going to draw a lot of people from St. Clair with
Sure.
our St. Clair presence, and frankly, we thought we were going to draw a lot of people in the Algonac market with people that used to work at the Algonac Savings
Sure.
Bank with me,
Yep.
and it was the case. So it was only a year later that we opened the Algonac office.
Okay.
So it was 2001, 2002, and then it was a few years before we opened Richmond, and then a couple of years after that we opened Port Huron.
Now, were those, I'll say, bellwether things that, hey, we got to hit X before we go there? Or is it just a natural growth to say, okay,
In the case of Algonac, it was already in
We're
the
going.
plan. Yeah, it was there. The others, yeah, you wanted to hit some certain marks before you continued to move along that way. But in our market, it was, you could see the importance of growing by way of the commercial loan as
Sure.
well, and a presence in Port Huron. Well, it was very important, so we saw that as well when we went there.
now do you think, we talk about things have changed tremendously since, say, 2001, we're talking 22, 23 years later.
Sure.
In your mind, if you had to start today, you think it's a go, or do you think it's a deep thought to really, because everything's changed a lot.
Oh man, it has changed considerably. The plan we put together back in 2001 wouldn't be the same kind of plan
Correct.
that you put together today. It'd be a little more. It'd be probably a little more commercial oriented, and certainly you'd have to look at the competitors a whole lot more closely
Sure.
and things of that sort. Yeah.
That's like I mentioned, I think, again, before we started, but, there are some things that go on today that you couldn't even imagine if you go back to 1974.
There, surprises every day,
Yeah.
Craig, just as you say, yeah.
So
As
like
you-
today, and I'm not saying that Seaway/North Star Bank does, but there are now, I always look at it from the standpoint of, like, there was, back in the day, 1974, 1984, there was no IT department, right? Just wasn't.
Yep.
So that's an extra cost. There was no thing as social media, but today there is. Businesses have to look at different ways. It's like almost you look at like the Times Herald. Okay, the Times Herald today is just a small percentage of what it used to be, right?
Sure.
And it's not anybody's fault. It's just that we evolve and things change.
Yep.
So things change with it.
Well, kind of where you're going, Craig, is when you IT, marketing, data processing, regulation and compliance, they are so big in today's market.
Right.
That's what that's one of the main reasons you find that a small community bank today would struggle,
Right.
because they can't afford to have all that.
All those expenses.
Exactly,
Yeah.
to have all that overhead. So to be a part of a bigger company that
Right.
has all that, and you're just doing your job here.
You know. The other interesting thing is when you look at it, you know that if you did it today, your real estate would change, right? I mean, you wouldn't need as big of a footprint.
That tends to be the case more and
Yeah.
more as you're seeing some of these offices come into being. Yeah, you're right.
Like I think about some of these things and I think, can you imagine what Roy Klecha in 1975, if somebody would have said, you need to develop an application. And you would have said, application? We have applications. No, an application for your phone, right?
True.
You couldn't even imagine that. It's sort of like the Back to the Future.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good way to put it.
You know, it's
Yeah.
like some of these things didn't exist.
Yeah. Craig, one of the very, very special moments that I had at Seaway was when we hired my daughter, Amber, to bring a marketing program to the bank, which we were all just attempting to do in our extra time, and she brought a true program, and I've always been so thankful and loved working with her, and now she happens to be the marketing director for North Star Bank, and all continues on for her.
So, Roy Klecha, we've covered a lot of ground here. A guy that grew up here, went to school here through grade school, went to college, came back, and spent the good part of 40 years in town, or Algonac, in the area.
Yeah, that's right. Always part of it.
So you've been retired for a handful of years,
Yeah.
and tell me what Roy does today.
Yeah, that's I'd like to. It was one of the terrific things that happened in 2014. I was remarried to my current wife, and we're just having a tremendous time because we were both able to retire soon after, and we enjoy traveling, we enjoy biking, just getting out.
Yep.
And actually something we tremendously enjoy are 21 grandchildren.
21.
21 grandchildren, Craig. It's yeah.
So you need a calendar.
There's no question. You need a calendar. You're talking about dates. I need some to tell me all the names.
just to write the birthdays down.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So between those things, living right here in St.
Right.
Clair and enjoying family time and just the time that we can do it together, the time goes by in a hurry.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Now, out of the 21, I won't say
No,
hook
but-
you to a number, but
Okay.
how many live in the local area, roughly?
Let's see. My daughter lives less than a mile away with two of them, and there's only 3 of them that are actually out of state.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Car
all of
ride
them
away.
within a very reasonable distance. Yeah.
So who heads up the calendar for events for the family? Your
Wait,
wife?
well, no, that's a together job for sure.
Because
Yeah.
seriously, with 21 grandkids and the children,
Yeah.
you've got birthday parties every month.
All the time.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
the time, and loving them all the time.
Okay. Good to
Yeah.
hear. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for coming in. I think I learned some things about over the years, and I like interacting with people. Good to see you in here. And if you or anybody else knows anybody else that would like to sit across from me, call the number on the screen, 586-707-5811. And until next time, we'll say thank you to Roy Klecha for number 73.
Terrific. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. Yeah.